Hi, everybody. This is Ruta Lee, and you're listening to TV Confidential.
Ed Robertson, welcoming you to this week's edition of TV Confidential, radio talk show about television that will welcome Kathleen Bradley in our second hour. Kathleen Bradley, the first African-American model to join ranks with Barker's Beauties on The Price is Right, and the actress known around the world as Mrs. Parker, the voluptuous next-door neighbor to Ice Cube and Chris Tucker in the 1995 cult classic Friday. Calendar year 2025 marks the 30th anniversary of the release of Friday. We'll talk to Kathleen about that. We'll also ask her about her recent reunion with Ice Cube on the set of the music video for It's My Ego, the lead single from Ice Cube's album release, Man Down. Kathleen Bradley will join us in our second hour. We hope you stay tuned for that. Coming up later on this hour, we will welcome Morgan White Jr. Morgan White Jr., longtime radio personality for WBZ Radio in Boston and the undisputed king of trivia. Morgan has hosted live improv trivia shows both in Boston and in other parts of the country for more than 45 years. And as you will hear, no one approaches the subject of trivia quite the same as he does. Morgan White Jr. will join us later on this hour. We hope you stay tuned for that as well. In the meantime, we'll begin our first hour by remembering our friend Mick Martin. Mick Martin, a man who enjoyed a long, interesting, and successful career in two seemingly opposite fields. For many, many years, he was the film critic for such newspapers as the Sacramento Union. He was also the co-author of Video Movie Guide, the annual guide to movies and TV shows available on home video, as well as the collaborator on such books as Them Ornery Mitchum Boys, the joint autobiography of character actor John Mitchum and his slightly more famous brother, Robert Mitchum. At the same time, Mick Martin has also enjoyed a long career as a blues musician. I think he's recorded 7 albums, plus he's played alongside Bo Diddley, the Yardbirds, Jimmy Smith, and Mick Taylor of the Rolling Stones. Mick Martin also hosted Mick Martin's Blues Party, a very popular radio show heard on Sacramento Public Radio. He was also the very last person ever to interview actor Jack Kelly. Mick Martin passed away Sunday, July 13th at the age of 76. Mick Martin visited TV Confidential a few times over the years, including a conversation that originally aired in May 2015, in which we discussed not only his conversation with Jack Kelly, but his collaboration with John and Robert Mitchum, among other topics. As we pick up the conversation, we said to Mick, welcome back to the program.
Well, it's great to be talking with you, Ed. I've always considered it to be an honor that I was part of Maverick, Legend of the West. I love that book.
Well, I love that book, too, and Mick was generous enough to allow me to use part of his interview with Jack Kelly, which, as it happened, Mick, it sounds like you had a chance to talk to Jack several times when you interviewed him. It wasn't just like a one phone call and done type of deal. It sounds like you had a chance to talk to him several times.
Well, in fact, he was so easy to talk with that it was his idea. He said, you know what, I got to go, because he was at that point, county supervisor in Huntington Beach. And so he had a couple of things that came during one of our conversations. And he said, well, let me get you back. Talk to my secretary. We set up another phoner, and we were off and running.
I have another radio friend who, what you and he have in common is that you more or less formed the bond with Kelly. There's a similarity in that, based on, hearing your story and what I know about his story, if Kelly liked you, he sort of formed a friendship with you.
Yes, he was a very affable guy, very funny. It's like Roy Huggins said, he's a naturally funny man. He'd stop our conversation for a second and talk about a street light, but even when he was talking to the people who worked in the office, there was a lot of humor in the way he approached life. So he was a delight. He really was.
Yeah, and what strikes me most is the complete interview was published in Film Facts many years ago, but I know the back issues of Film Facts are available for collectors and film and TV aficionados. And if you get a chance to read the whole the entire interview that Mick had with Jack Kelly, you really get a sense of who Jack was as a person. I mean, and even though, like, just staying on the topic of Maverick, even though going into that show, Jack was a far more accomplished actor than James Garner was, he was not someone who rested on his laurels. He was always open to suggestion and always trying to push himself to be the best he could be to make that show to continue to make that show a success.
And he was a very humble man. I mean, he referred to himself as kind of a one-trick pony. And looking back on Maverick, he said, I could do one thing really well. And yet I had to remind him about the fact that he was in the groundbreaking science fiction film Forbidden Planet, because so many sci-fi movies, to quote Corey Ackerman, were really trashy and unbelievable. And with the effect by the Disney studio, that was a good one.
It was, and that is a movie that time has been kind to over the years. I mean, a lot of movies from that era, they tend to get the Mystery Science Theater 3000 treatment, whether they deserve it or not, simply because they were made in the 50s. But Forbidden Planet, that is a classic in every sense of the word. It still holds up.
Well, when you've got great source material, it was based on William Shakespeare's The Tempest. Mm-hmm. And so here you have a solid story on which to base this science fiction film, plus effects that were so far ahead of their time that they still look good today in the era of CGI. And that's a remarkable thing.
We're talking to Mick Martin. Mick has interviewed hundreds of actors and musicians throughout his career, including Clint Walker, John Mitchum, and as we mentioned before, Mick was the very last journalist to interview Jack Kelly before Jack died in 1992. Parts of Mick's interview with Jack are available in Maverick Legend of the West, which you can find at mavericklegendofthewest.com. Mick Martin also hosts Mick Martin's Blues Party, a weekend radio music show that is heard on Capital Public Radio. I want to go back to our open, how we introduced you, Mick. You have spent 40 years as a musician, 30 years as a journalist. To me, that's an impossibility, because when I think of music, I think of I think of riffs, I think of improvising, I think of in the moment. And when I think of journalism, I think of deadline, and I think of rigidity. So how have you managed to make that work?
My fascination with the entertainment field has always been the thing that spurred me on. When I was 14, I published a fanzine, which at that time, comic books were nothing like they are today. The pictures today, they weren't like that in the 60s. But there were a group of us, including Roy Thomas, who went on to write for Marvel Comics, and created Ultron, as a matter of fact. That's the new Avengers movies, or the second Avengers movie. All of us were very serious about that, and here I was putting out my first issue of Comics Illustrated, and the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan.
Timing is everything.
It was an epiphany. It's like, I want girls. Girls, I'm going to play music. And for some reason, anything that I have fallen in love with, I mean, being a film critic, there was a gentleman here in Sacramento by the name of Bob Wilkins who had a show called
Creature Features on Channel 2.
Right. He was the first one on Channel 2 in the Oakland, San Francisco area, and then John Stanley took that over, and he also wrote the Creature Features movie guide and published Them Ornery Mitchum Boys. I got him and John Mitchum together. But this web that develops when you're absolutely devoted to what you love, you meet people, and it's just a great thing to be around people who share your interests. So playing Carnegie Hall with Jimmy Smith is something that has given me a lot of credibility. I don't know whether I deserve it. I was kicked out of the first 7 bands I was in when I was a kid, but I just didn't give up. And Bob was always calling me on the phone and saying, "Are you working on a newspaper yet?" So finally, I got a job daily paper, the Sacramento Union, and they didn't know what to do with me because all I knew about was entertainment. And then, of course, the Ebert and Siskel era came along, and every paper had to have an entertainment writer. Mm-hmm. So there I was at the right time and the right place.
And the right time and the right place is right now as we continue our conversation with Mick Martin, musician, film and TV historian. Mick was also the collaborator, author of such books as Them Ornery Mitchum Boys and the Video Movie Guide, which was one of the first annual guides to movies on film and television that are available on home video. Mick Martin passed away Sunday, July 13th at the age of 76. The conversation you're listening to right now originally aired in May 2015 on TV Confidential. Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back.
This portion of TV Confidential is brought to us by our friends at Front Porch Realty, the community of realtors in the Northern Bay area of California that is committed to finding the solution that is best for their clients. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to sell or lease your property in Northern California, call Karen Strain at 415-886-7411 or visit frontporchrealtygroup.com for more information on how they can help you.
One more item. If you're starting a company, particularly one that is in an emerging market, you know that averting any sort of legal dispute is crucial to your business plan. Our friends at Tectonic Law offer an array of services that can help you avoid and preempt future litigation while also developing and protecting your intellectual property and intangible assets. Tectonic Law serves the needs of a host of emerging industries throughout California and beyond, including industrial designers, beverage makers, artists, farmers, retail stores, health practitioners, wellness experts, cosmetics manufacturers, nonprofit organizations, innovators in sustainable practices, and libraries. Go to tectoniclaw.com to learn more about how Tectonic Law can help your business thrive. tectoniclaw.com. Rock solid representation for groundbreaking industries.
Hello, this is Robert Wagner, and you are listening TV Confidential.
It's a conversation you're listening to right now, originally aired in May 2015 on TV Confidential. Mick, before we went to break, we were talking about how you came to write Video Movie Guide. If I remember correctly, Mick, you beat Leonard Maltin to the punch on that by a couple of years.
Well, he changed the name of his book, but the truth of the matter is TV movies existed because I get him and Stephen Scheuer mixed up. In Sacramento, we used to have the headquarters of Tower Records, and they opened up a video store in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And it was the thing to do in New York to go to Tower Video. And just by happenstance, I was disgusted with the fact that I was getting less and less assignments to do with entertainment, which is all I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. And so I created a book out of all my old movie reviews. And we went over to Tower, which is, wasn't far from the Sacramento Union building, just over the Tower Bridge. And I went to the guy I used to work nights with at Tower, and I said, Stan, do me a favor. Will you look at this book and let me know what you think? He says, you know what? This would be perfect for our New York video store. And it was all about a word, Ed. It was one word. The word was video.
Yeah.
And I never realized you could build an empire on a spin. But that's what happened. We published from 1986 to 2007, and really it was the computer and the internet that put us out of business.
Well, yeah, and that I understand, because while there's a lot of good information, both in terms of movie reviews and reference guides on the web, there's nothing quite like an actual book, such as the type you did, where you're able to do the sort of depth that you're not able to do on the website, because people are not necessarily inclined to want to sit at their computer and scroll down. They'd rather hold something in their hands. So in that respect, I mourn the loss of the Video Movie Guide.
Well, it was probably the worst day of my life. They kept cutting the reviews. I mean, that was the bane of my existence. Leonard took the high road, and I think he was smart. He put out a classic movies book, and then he started, changing his video book to just reflecting more current films. But when I opened up, we had a great index for character actors, actors in general and directors. And Hank Worden was gone. And I just sat in my chair and couldn't believe it. I mean, and a lot of people don't even know who Hank Worden is, but in The Searchers, he's the guy who sits in the wheelchair and says, "Thank you, ma'am." And in Red River, he's just planting and reading. It just don't seem right to kill a man and then read words over him. So Hank was in almost all of the great John Wayne movies, and it broke my heart. His character actors, to me, were the reason why I enjoyed so many movies so much.
Who are some of your other favorite character actors, film or television?
Well, that could last for hours, but I'm a big fan of Warner Brothers films and television. And there are a lot of people who repeatedly worked for certain studios. They were under contract. So Alan Hale, Peter Lorre, there were so many great character actors who made the movies. When Howard Hawks made a movie, you'd see Walter Brent, whether it was To Have and Have Not or Rio Bravo. John Ford used the same stock company over and over again. And even though it seemed strange on the Warner Brothers TV shows to see Mickey Simpson as a different villain every week, on Maverick, he really got a kick out of these old Warner Brothers films, especially the gangster movies. They were like lightning. They were so fast. Everybody worked so well together. In my mind, Cagney and Bogart were as much character actors as the people that worked with you, and Alan Jenkins. So Warner Brothers is a real favorite for me. I like some of the MGM actors. I like Paramount actors. It's like I break it down into studios, and when it comes to real entertainment, I thought Warner Brothers was the best, because their movies, I swear, they only did one or two takes, and they were off to the next thing, which is why I like the early Westerns that Warner Brothers put out. And Maverick was an absolute must for me every Sunday night, because I loved that show, and I saw John Mitchum on there. In fact, we were talking about the fact that I contributed to Them Ornery Mitchum Boys, and I had written up the two of The Enforcer, a Dirty Harry movie, and I get this phone call. Is this Mick Martin? This is John Mitchum, and I wanted you to know how much I appreciate what you said about character actors in your review of The Enforcer. And I said, who is this? Because it just struck me as odd. Right here in Sacramento, it's amazing the people who have lived here. We think of this as nowhere, but it really was amazing to spend all that time with John. He was a collector of all these stories that he loved to tell, and most of them had to do with a character actor. Lloyd Barcroft, who was in hundreds of movies. When I was a kid, I interviewed John Carradine, and I was about 16 years old, and it was fascinating to talk to these people because they made the movies work for me.
I want to go back to something you said about John. I knew that, obviously I knew that he was Robert's brother, and I, having watched a lot of the Warner Brothers shows and a lot of shows from the 60s and 70s, I knew that he was always, directors cast him a lot. He was always working, but you were telling me off mic, you felt he was never quite utilized as well as he could have been.
Well, I kind of thought on Hard Luck Hit. It wasn't really until the 70s in the Dirty Harry movies where he played Frank Burkeville. That's a great scene in Dirty Harry when Clint Eastwood walks into the cop shop and he says, "How you doing, fatso?" And Mitchum says, "Well, you're a sweet man, Harry." But then they go to Tito Stadium after the Andrew Robinson character. I think it was called Scorpio. And John Mitchum says, "Can't make it over the fence, Harry," and he pats his stomach. There's too much linguine. And the guy was a real standout, and his death scene. Every one of Harry's partners done.
Yes.
But out of all of them, Mitchum was the most convincing and touching. And I went back and watched a lot of his movies, and he was there and gone. Whether it's Submarine Command or Flying Leatherneck. I said to my wife, "Hey, Diane, it's John." "Well, forget it." Because he was gone again. He was in the Maverick episode, The Goose Grounder, and he was one of the guys who was gambling in the saloon where they were all basically staying in this bar to stay out of the rain because it was just really coming down. And it was, John always added that sense of verisimilitude to his characters. It didn't matter. He was a good cowboy. He was a good soldier. John could make almost anything work, but like I say, he was there and gone.
We'll pick up that thread on the other side of the break. You're listening to a conversation with Mick Martin that originally aired in May 2015 on TV Confidential. Mick Martin, longtime blues artist, longtime radio host, longtime movie critic, co-author of Video Movie Guide, and the collaborator of Them Ornery Mitchum Boys, a joint biography of John Mitchum and Robert Mitchum. Mick Martin passed away Sunday, July 13th at the age of 76. We'll play more of our conversation with Mick from 2015. We come back here on TV Confidential.
Now you can fly anywhere in the world and pay discount prices on your airline tickets. Book a flight today to London, Paris, Madrid, or anywhere else you want to go. And pay a lot less guaranteed. Call the International Travel Department right now at Low Cost Airlines.
800-222-0511. 800-222-0511. Again, that's 800-222-0511.